Kia ora and welcome to Baha'i On Air. In our episode today we are interviewing a guest, Bruce Hancock from Whangarei. Bruce is an expert mason and tile setter, and he has been working on a special restoration project in the Holy Land. The project has centred on the Shrine of the Bab. The Shrine of the Bab and its gardens are renowned the world over for their beauty and tranquility. In 2008, they were inscribed along with the Shrine of Baha'u'llah near Akka as a site of outstanding universal value on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Last year alone, some 760,000 tourists and 7,500 Baha'i pilgrims and visitors were welcomed here. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
So tell us how you came to be involved with this restoration project.
Very interesting question. I'm really not sure the answer. I worked there when I was a youth about 30 years ago, and I did quite a bit of tiling, and I actually worked on this building then, doing cleaning and restoring of it. And during their research, I guess they must have found my name on the file, and I had a phone call and asked if I was interested in coming and participating in the projects.
Wonderful. And so it meant leaving your family and being away from home for that period of time, and of course you're familiar with living in the Holy Land because you've lived there before.
Yes, I lived there in 1976 and for about 5 years, where I met my wife and married her there and returned to New Zealand 30 years ago.
Your father was also involved working with you in previous times?
That's right. He was there for maybe 4 years or so, and we both worked on the shrine together.
Right. So as a young man, you were apprenticed to your father, were you, and became that expert tile setter?
I guess so, yes. We taught each other a lot of things.
The golden domed Baha'i Shrine of the Bab is known as the Queen of Carmel. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, this building is a very interesting building. It's actually in two parts. The first part was built in 1908 by Abdu'l-Baha, who was the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith. He built it to house the remains of the Bab, who was the forerunner of the Baha'i faith. In 1950, Shogi Effendi built a decorative superstructure over this tomb, basically, and what we worked on was this decorative superstructure of the tomb of the Bab.
So who was the Bab? The shrine that you've been working on commemorates his life. Can you tell us more about the Bab's life?
Yes, the Bab was the forerunner to Baha'u'llah, who's the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. He lived in Shiraz and proclaimed in 1844 that he was here to prepare the way for one who would come after him, the promised one of all ages who would come to bring about world peace. He was executed in 1853, and for a long period of time his remains were hidden in different parts of Persia. And in 1908, Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith, built a tomb for him, and his remains were interred there in 1908.
Right. I understand that the Baha'i faith had ended up in the Holy Land because of the banishment and exile that Baha'u'llah and his family had undergone from Persia in the early days. The Ottoman Empire and the Shah of Iran had collectively worked against the Baha'i faith and it exiled and banished them to that part of the Ottoman Empire.
There was no choice.
Right. And it wasn't Israel in those days, it was Palestine.
Palestine, or even Syria, or they had different names at that stage.
That's right, yes. So it's a fascinating part of the world for you to be involved with. It's, halfway around the world from New Zealand.
Exactly.
And you've spent quite a bit of your time in that part of the world now. Do you speak any Hebrew or?
Yes, I spoke a little bit of Hebrew. When I was living there for 5 years, I felt quite comfortable going shopping and using Hebrew. But in the last 30 years, I forgot most of it. So when I went back this time for this 6 months period, it started to come back, but it wasn't quite as good as it was 30 years ago, that's for sure.
And being in the Holy Land at the Bahá'í World Centre, you're with a whole range of people from all around the world, because there are many, many people serving there from different countries. Did you get reacquainted with people you'd worked with before, or was it a whole new group of people?
There was 9 people who were there that I knew from when I was there 30 years ago, and the rest were new, and it was very exciting to get to know them and to learn about them. And the World Centre had changed a great deal in those 30 years, and when I was living there then, it was only about 200, 250 people working at the Bahá'í World Centre. Now there's about 700.
Goodness, yes.
And so, like you said, they're from all over the world. I think there was people from 80 different countries serving there when I was there for that 6 months period.
The restoration itself was quite a massive project. There was a lot of research that went into it beforehand, and it's designed to last a lengthy period of time, I understand.
Yes, the project really has been running for 5 years, and the first 3 years were just basically researching all the materials and products that will go into it, the design of the earthquake strengthening of the building, sourcing and fabricating the special tiles that were laid on the dome, finding out what kind of products were best for the stone restoration. And the actual restoration project, this restoring part of the project itself, took about 2 years, just on 2.5 years. The reason for retiling the dome was that the tiles had deteriorated to such a point that all the gold that was originally on them had been, well, 99% of it had been washed off. The pollution in Haifa was fairly serious. Well, thank goodness the Haifa municipality is cleaning up their act and the pollution is getting a lot less. And the acid rain and other pollutants, and there's sandstorms and all kinds of weather conditions in Haifa, and over the period of 60 years the tiles had deteriorated to such a point that the gold had all but washed off. And so the Universal House of Justice, which is the world governing body of the Baha'i faith, decided to reinstate the building to its original condition, and this was part of the restoration project. So the tiles on the dome that had to be all removed, right back to the concrete structure of the dome. The dome was then replastered and waterproofed, and I arrived just at the end of the replastering process, so I was there for the whole of the waterproofing project, and then we laid the tiles on the dome.
Working on such a magnificent and unique building, Bruce, must be quite different from your normal day-to-day occupation.
Yeah, that's right. Laying tiles in a bathroom and laying tiles on a dome are quite a different experience. And these tiles that we used on this dome were unique in themselves because they were specially made and designed for this project, copying the original dome tiles that were laid 60 years ago. And the process that was used was developed by the company to make these tiles. They had never done this kind of work before, and the company had to develop a whole unique process just to make these tiles. The original tiles were a ceramic tile with a glaze and then a gold leaf and then a glaze on top. And these ones are a porcelain tile with a glaze and it's almost like an applique that's put on and then baked. It's the same process as you get when you buy a porcelain plate with the gold lettering or gold inscriptions or gold motifs on it. It's the same process that is used for doing those as doing these tiles, except this is a bit stronger because it's outside, but it's just basically the same process. And these are dishwasher proof and microwave safe, so. So with these tiles, there are about 140 unique tile shapes that were made, and we also had to cut about another 140 tiles to suit the dome itself on each panel that we laid tiles on. So these tiles themselves, when we came to lay them, because they're fish scale shaped, the bottom of the tile is 17 mils thick, the top of the tile is 6 mils thick, so it has the look of slate where they overlay each other, they overlap each other, but they don't actually overlap each other just because the bottom of the tile is thicker than the top, so they have that stepping look up the dome. And they're fish scale shaped with a single curve on the bottom and a double curve on the top of each tile. So the challenge was laying tiles that aren't square on a double curved dome. So you've got a curve going around the dome and you've got a curve going up the dome. And there's no way you can put a straight edge on to get a straight line. And this was kind of a big challenge to me because you're so used to using straight lines when you're laying tiles. The tiles themselves were manufactured so beautifully and perfectly that they actually, if we laid the tiles even, then they actually formed a curve on the dome. Because if you look from the top of the dome on a plan, the tiles are in circles. So they actually have to form a circle on the dome. They're not a straight line across, they actually form a slight circle. So that when you're looking from the top, they're a complete circle around the dome. The lady who actually produced the plans for the tiles, when she was creating the CAD design, she actually couldn't make the tiles work because every time she printed a plan, the tiles were wrong. They kept going into the ribs that are on the dome. So they actually looked back at the old plans that were made 60 years ago by the original architect, and they found a plan that he had drawn of the tile design that he had used. And on the plan there was a small equation, and as soon as the lady saw this equation, she knew that was the answer to her problem, and she entered that into the computer, and then the tiles fitted. And what it was, that each tile had to be 1 degree turned against the tile next to it, not 1 millimeter, because she actually couldn't measure the difference, but when she put it in the computer that each tile was 1 degree turned against the next one, then it formed the curve by itself. And so
fascinating.
It was absolutely, it was a miracle that they actually found these old plans because they're 60 years old, stored in some box somewhere. And so the process of laying the tiles was a lot easier than I expected in that sense. But there were many other challenges on the dome. There's 18 panels of tiles on the dome, and each panel was unique in its sense because the ribs that divided the panels weren't straight either. They changed size from large to small, and because they were laid 60 years ago, and you can't actually put a string line down a dome to get a straight line. So they were just all eye-sighted, so some of them were a bit wider than others, some of them a bit narrower than others. So these were challenges we had to try and overcome when we were laying the tiles. I was really concerned that it wouldn't work, but it's worked extremely well. And we've really had no major issues with laying the tiles. It's been really, it hasn't been easy, but it hasn't been hard. We have a few challenges, but it's generally it's gone better than I expected it to go. So that's.
You had a team of people, obviously, working with you. It wasn't a single-handed effort, was it?
That's right, and such a wonderful team of guys that were working with me. Well, guys and girls actually. There was three women who were working on the site with us, and they came from many countries, and it was very interesting to be able to work with such a diverse group of people. There were a lot of Israelis working on the project also, from Arab background and Jewish background, Christian background, Muslim background. So it was a unique experience, and all these people worked with such dedication because the local Haifa population consider the shrine their shrine because it's the most beautiful thing in Israel. In Haifa. Haifa is an industrial city, so there's lots of factories and pollution and power stations, and there's an oil refinery, and the Baha'i Gardens are the only really beautiful thing in Haifa, and all the local people were really concerned. For 2.5 years the shrine was completely covered and you couldn't see what was happening, and they kept complaining and wanting to know what was going on, and it was all hidden behind this big cover. So the municipality actually asked the Baha'is to have a opening ceremony when we were finished, and that was a very unique experience too, because they invited all the religious leaders of Haifa, from the Arab background, from the Muslim background, from the Christian background, from the Druze background, the Jewish background, and they all were there together at this opening commemoration. And it was such a wonderful sight to see that, you know, there really is no difference between the religions, and everybody there felt that this shrine was theirs. They appreciate the beauty, they appreciate what the Baha'is are doing in Haifa, and Haifa is a special city.
And obviously whenever there's a number of people, different backgrounds working on a project, there's bound to be issues that arise, problems that need to be solved. This must have been an interesting experience because of the different backgrounds that everyone had, the approaches to problem solving. Can you describe how that was for you?
Well, it was the best experience in my life, actually. I've worked on many building sites with many very good people, but to work on this building site was unique. It was a unique experience. On a general building site, if you find a problem or discover something that is not quite right, there's a lot of finger pointing going on and saying it was his fault or that was somebody else's fault. But if we found a problem on this building, we'd talk to the supervisor and we'd say, okay, let's find an answer. Nobody was criticized, nobody was accused of doing something wrong. We just had to find the answer and finish the project. And it was such a refreshing way of working. It was so simple. It was just everybody had their focus of completing this project in the best and the most effective and efficient way possible. And it was just so easy in a sense that, you know, the work was hard, but the way that it was carried out was so beautiful and easy.
So did you get a special feeling from working so closely to something that's so holy to you?
Yes and no, in a sense. Yes, every time I walked from home to work, I had to walk past the shrine and I knew where I was. But when you're actually working on the building, you just had to focus on the job at hand and lay tiles. You actually, if you thought about what you're doing on what the building was, you'd be distracted. So your whole focus had to be on laying these special tiles, and it was a big challenge. There was 3 of us laying the tiles, and then after we'd laid the tiles, a grouting crew would come through and grout the tiles behind us, and so we just had to concentrate on laying these tiles. And it was very interesting the day that we laid the last tile. We had been, you know, for 3-4 months, our sole concentration was just putting these tiles on this dome, and suddenly we put the last tile on, and we thought, what do we do now? You know, it's done. And we all just sat around and we just didn't want to go home. We just kind of felt that, you know, we've done this such magnificent thing, but, you know, it's finished now. Our job is done, you know, and we didn't want to leave. It was really an interesting feeling, an interesting sensation that we had. And eventually we had to go home. But
you must have had a great sense of fulfillment and satisfaction from that.
Oh, definitely.
And
yes.
a very rewarding role to play in the whole process.
Yes, it was very rewarding, and the most rewarding thing that I felt while working there was this, working with these young people, these volunteers who were there from all these different countries, and their dedication and their enthusiasm about working.
Right.
No matter what you asked them, they would do it without question. We were working on scaffold that it's basically the height of a 10-story building. And every time, if you climbed all the way up the scaffold and you realized you'd forgotten something, you had to ask somebody to go and get it. And these guys would go and pick it up, and they wouldn't complain, saying, oh, I did it yesterday, why don't you get somebody else? You asked them, immediately they'd do what you asked. It was such a wonderful crew. And I mean, if the whole world worked like this, we'd have no problems.
It's that sense of service.
Sense of service and sense of dedication to what
yes.
they were doing, and self-sacrifice. And some of the jobs were difficult and very hard, and these kids just did it without question.
And of course you were there as a volunteer as well. You weren't being paid for this
That's
responsibility.
true, yes.
So it was an act of love on your part as well. And I believe that the project came in well ahead of schedule.
Yes, they were expecting it to take about 5 years total, the whole project to do. And it was finished in about 2.5 years. And that was through the dedication of these workers. For a period of time when they were doing the seismic strengthening, the shrine was closed for a 4-month period. And because they had to open up the foundations and re-strengthen and strengthen all the foundation work. And these youth worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 4 months without a break. Yeah. And so that's dedication.
That's dedication.
Yeah.
How did you find out about the Baha'i faith and become a Baha'i in the first instance?
It's a long story. We haven't got time to tell it all today, but my grandmother's sister became a Baha'i in 1936, and my grandparents became Baha'is in the late 40s, and I became Baha'i in the early 70s, and then my parents became Baha'is in the late 70s. So
there's a whole lot of generations of the Hancock family who are Baha'is. Just to go back a little, because you were away from your wife for 6 months while you were in the Holy Land, and I just find that the story of your marriage is a fascinating story that our viewers might be interested to hear more about. Would you like to go back to your youth and describe how you met and what it felt like becoming part of a large Persian family?
Yes, well, I should ask my wife permission. Yes, that was another unique experience. The first day of my pilgrimage in 1976, I saw my wife for the first time. For somehow I knew that she was the one from that first day I saw her, but she didn't know that I was the one. It took a couple of years to convince her that I was the right one for her. For a period of time, her parents were working in Haifa at the time, and she came to visit them, and she was on her way to study overseas. And she left the Holy Land and went to India and studied there for a while, and we corresponded, and we agreed to marry, and we were married in Haifa in 1979, and our son was born in New Zealand in 1981, and we've lived here ever since that time. Yeah.
Your wife has become a New Zealander.
She's a New Zealander through and through. She's lived longer in New Zealand than she has in Iran.
Right.
And about enjoying a large Persian family, well, that came with the package.
You mentioned Shogi Effendi earlier. Can you tell us his role in the construction of the Shrine of the Bab?
Shogi Effendi was the great-grandson of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. And he was appointed as guardian of the Baha'i faith, which his role was to look after and care for the Baha'i community and to guide and to plan its future. And during the 1950s, early 1950s, he decided to build the decorative superstructure over the tomb of the Bab. And there is a tile that Shogi Effendi laid on the dome of the shrine. It was the first tile that was laid on the shrine, and during the restoration project, that tile was left, and you can see from the condition of that tile and the new tiles that we laid around it, what deterioration had taken place over this last 60 years. The original tile was gold, exactly like the other tiles around it now, but these tiles have been tested to withstand the problems the pollution problems, the weather problems in Haifa, and they're expected to last 200 to 300 years.
Goodness.
Yeah, so the whole process of manufacturing was completely different and technically far superior to what the original tiles were.
And the Shrine of the Bab sits on the slopes of Mount Carmel, across the bay from the Shrine of Baha'u'llah, which is in nearby Akka. Those two shrines are really the spiritual heart of the Baha'i world, is that correct? And can you talk to us about the administrative aspects as well, please?
That's right. The Shrine of the Bab was built on Mount Carmel because Baha'u'llah was banished to Israel, and Akka was imprisoned in the city of Akka for many, many years. And nearing the end of his life, he had a bit more freedom, and he travelled to Haifa several times. And on one of these occasions, he indicated to his son Abdu'l-Baha that to buy this piece of land and build a tomb for the remains of the Bab. So Baha'u'llah actually indicated to his son where to build the shrine. So Abdu'l-Baha, over the period of time, purchased the land with great difficulty and constructed the tomb with much difficulty, and then interred the remains of the Bab in this tomb.
Standing on a mountain, looking across the bay, the Queen of Carmel reigns. She reigns majestically. Cry out, O Zion, cry out to your Lord, cry out, O Zion, circle round in adoration, circle round your Lord.
So Bruce, in recent decades, I understand that the Shrine of the Bab has been beautified by the addition of a number of terraces both below and above the shrine, and that these have special significance.
The terraces on around the shrine are a beautification and that the Baha'is have done to show how important the Bab is to the Baha'i faith. He is the central figure in the Baha'i faith. These gardens have been laid out in such a way that they direct the view of anybody looking at it to the shrine. It draws your eyes to the center of the mountain because it's built from the foot of a mountain to the top. And as soon as you look at it, the terraces draw your eye to the center. And around this happens to be the spiritual center of the Baha'i faith in Haifa. And around the spiritual center is also established the administrative center of the Baha'i faith. So the Baha'i faith's World Centre is a spiritual centre and the administrative centre of the Baha'i faith. These terraces and the shrine itself have been designed in such a way to add glory to the station of the Bab. The shrine itself, if you look at the very top of the shrine, there is a small flame-like stone emblem right at the very, very pinnacle of the shrine. And Shogi Effendi said this signifies the candle that the Bab was deprived of when he was in prison. He wasn't even allowed a candle at night when he was imprisoned. And then Shogi Effendi said that this is his everlasting candle, and that the shrine and the gardens around it will be bathed in an ocean of light as recompense for that time that he was imprisoned without a candle. So it's a very significant place for the Baha'is.
Wonderful. So while you were living there, you obviously were living nearby to the shrine, and what kind of accommodation did you have there?
I had just a single bedroom apartment. It was furnished for me, so I didn't have to worry about that. And it was about 7 minutes walk from my apartment to the shrine where I had to work. The only problem was that it was on the 5th floor, which was 80 steps up and 80 steps down. And then when I get to work at the shrine, it was 120 steps up and 120 steps down. So I got fairly fit
No wonder you're so slim.
walking to work and walking home again. So.
Bruce, you were working at the World Administrative Centre for the Baha'i Faith. Did you get to meet the Universal House of Justice while you were there?
Yes, so we were lucky enough to meet them on several occasions as a body. But the most unique experience I had while I was in Haifa was the day that they had the official opening of the project. The House of Justice had asked all the members of the project team to meet with them and go to the shrine for prayers and for Thanksgiving for the completion of the project. I was kind of a bit in awe of this privilege, and I thought, this is the world governing body of the Baha'i faith. They're going to proceed to the shrine and we'd follow them to the shrine. And when we get there, they said, let's walk as friends to the shrine. And it really touched my heart that the supreme body of the Baha'i world faith just treated us as equals and friends, and it was such an amazing experience. That was it. But I met them individually on several occasions as individuals, but not as a group.
The Baha'i faith is not the only world religion that has its centre in the Holy Land. There are a number of other world religions who regard that part of the world as the Holy Land, aren't there?
That's true. Well, obviously Christianity has its foundations in Jerusalem, and Islam also has its second most holy site in Jerusalem. The Jews obviously call it home. It's where the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, is their most sacred spot for the Jewish faith. So really there's four world religions have their home or great foundation in Israel. And I guess that's what makes it such a special place. That is, everybody considers it so sacred and holy.
Right. And so this once-in-a-lifetime experience will have given you some sort of sense of humanity's collective life and the possibilities for that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd always kind of wondered, how are we going to live as a united world? We're all so diverse and so interested in our own affairs. But after working at the World Centre for this period of time and working with a very wide variety of different races and people, I thought there is great hope. We can do it. There's a lot of potential, and people there work together and live together as one family, and it was such a wonderful sight to see. It was so heartwarming to know that it is possible that we can have world peace and that we can all live as one united family.
This seems like a great place to stop the interview now, Bruce. Thank you so much for your time. We wish you well with your future endeavours.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Baha'i On Air. Ka kite ano. We'll see you next time.